Hi, my name is Abraham and I'm your big brother in recovery, coming back to you with another educational video. I happen to be a sober person who offers newcomers suggestions on recovery. That's all I am. I'm not the spokesman for Alcoholics Anonymous, nor am I being sponsored by Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just sharing my experience, strength, and hope with you, the viewer, on how to apply versus finding ways to defy the program of action located in the book. If this is your first time on this channel, please, by all means, subscribe, press the like button, and leave us a comment. We certainly want to hear if you're getting anything out of this, simply because, as I often say, and this is not a derogatory statement, I am not an entertainer, I am an educator. I'm involved in trying to teach people something, simply because teaching is merely the ability to increase the learning of this person in which is being taught. That's all I'm interested in, because the program of recovery is hard. However, it shouldn't be complicated. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what that means is that I haven't had the need to use any mind or mood-altering substances since November 17th, 1980. So, without further ado, as we often say, let's get right to it, because I don't want to waste your time. If you've been following me at any point, you know that I am not one to give my opinion, but I like to reference our basic text, which happens to be the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And not only that, but I want to build on the foundation that we started in the previous two videos. And the video was entitled, "What is our message? What is AA's message?" And many of you have emailed me, left me comments. Some of you have called me to thank me, and I'm grateful for it, right? But we are all learning together, because, as I often say, the more I learn, the less I find out I know. I want to remind you of something real quick as a PMA, a public service, or PSA, public service announcement. We have still masks, because the coronavirus is yet still with us. It's not going away until it's ready to go, right? So we have those on sale. They're reusable on our websites. Also, our best-selling book, Everything You Need to Know About Opioids, and last but not least, our other addiction textbook, Everything You Need to Know About Drugs, Addiction, and Recovery. Notice the thickness of the book. So it's not dental floss, it's a real in-depth book, and we've sold thousands of copies to date. So people apparently are being helped, because when you help others, you help yourself. Now, what we should have learned in the last two videos, because this is part 3, I like to draw your attention back to the story page. And the story page was the Alcoholics Anonymous page, the story page. And what we should have learned is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is found right on the story page. It is the subtitle to the book. It says the story, or the narrative, of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Now, what we've learned so far is that recovered is mentioned 16 times in this book, recovering 2 times. You can look at our video about what we did on recover, recovering, and recovered, and you'll see that. But notice it didn't say in the subtitle the story of how many thousands of men got clean and sober, because we learned in the last video that clean meant entire abstinence, but sobriety was soundness of mind. And the big book says a man is unthinking if he thinks that sobriety is enough. So the message is not that you can get clean and sober. So when you look at the word recovered, I want to give you something I didn't give you, that 97% of the people in recovery have no clue what we recover. That's why it's such a debate on if we do. I said once you are not recovering from a drug or alcohol because it's a symptom of a problem. But what you're recovering is a relationship with the Creator, because you and I developed a relationship with the created, or a relationship with the source because we developed one with the resource, which in this context was alcoholism. And I like to show you that on page 72, if you don't mind going with me there real quick. That's where I want to start off at, because there's a great misconception. Do we recover? It says into action. Having made our personal inventory, that's step 4. Notice they tell you never complete a step. They just said you made it. It's done. What shall we do about it? Okay, I've completed step 4. Now what? We have been trying to get a new attitude. That's a new way of thinking. A new relationship with our Creator. There it is. And to discover the obstacles in our path. So that's the goal of recovery right there. We want to develop a new relationship. That's what we want to recover. Notice it says a new. So therefore, not a new, but a new relationship with our Creator, simply because I never had one. So now that's what I'm in pursuit of. And step 4 helps me to eliminate those obstacles that are in the way. So we just noticed what we recover, a relationship. Now I'd like to draw your attention to something else. We learned that alcoholism in the last video was simply a mental obsession combined with a physical compulsion, and it equals an allergic reaction. It's a progressive illness, which the brochure said, which can never be cured but can be arrested. Notice, not cured, but can be arrested. We're like men who lost their legs. We never grow new ones. A pickle could be a cucumber. Well, a cucumber could be a pickle, but a pickle could never revert and be back to a cucumber. So we notice what we recovered, relationship. What did we recover from? An illness, not a disease. Remember, the word disease was only found in this book one time on page 64, the last paragraph, and it talked about a spiritual disease. The last video I showed you numerous places where the big book called it an illness. Now, this is where I want to get to. Go to page 44. Page 44. And I want you to see something. Now we're going to learn something today that's going to be pretty interesting. If you look at the first paragraph on page 44, and the last 3 lines of that paragraph, it says, if that be the case, meaning you're alcoholic or addicted, you may be suffering from, here it goes again, an illness which only, notice this, a spiritual experience will conquer. I want to focus on 2 things right now. A means one, only one. Why? There's only one problem, there's only one solution. And what is the solution? It's a spiritual experience. So here's the question, what is the problem? I'll show you what the problem is in a minute, and it's going to really, really trip you out. But notice what they said, you only have one solution and you only have one problem. So let's look at page 17. Now remember, here's an Abrahamism. There is no defense against the truth. Because remember, truth is never invented. It's always discovered. And when you discover the truth, that's what we do on this channel, it'll set you free. Now, let's look at chapter 2. Notice what it says. There is a solution, one solution. A means one. So what is the problem? The solution, obviously, is the spiritual awakening or the spiritual experience. And those 2 words are interchangeable, but I'll tell you the difference. Well, let's look at what the problem is, first of all. Bill summed it up on page 14, first paragraph. Simple but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. Oh, so is that the problem? I think so. Let's take a look and see. Could we kindly go to page 23? Let's let the big book do the talking. Page 23. Let's see what Bill says next. 23. Matter of fact, let's look at the first paragraph. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting a terrible cycle in motion. You remember the mental obsession, physical craving, allergic reaction? That's what they're talking about here. Notice what it's going to say. Therefore, notice, it's there for a reason. The main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body, because thinking, feeling, action, that's the body, results. Notice something. Go to page 62 now. Because most people say, okay, how can self-centeredness be the problem? Well, let's look and see. We saw that we had to destroy self-centeredness. 62. Page 62. First paragraph. Selfishness, self-centeredness, exclamation point. That we think is the root of our troubles. There it is. So guess what the problem is? Self-centered. Why is self-centered the problem? Because guess what the opposite of self-centered is? Go to page, let me see something. It is God-centered. The opposite of self-centered is God-centered. That's why there's no chemical solution for your spiritual problem, because either it's about you or it's about God. Now, let's continue to move. I want to show you something. In the message, it says, how many thousands of men and women have recovered? We want to recover a relationship from alcoholism, which is an illness, which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Let's look at what Bill did. You know, the big book says that Bill had a sudden spiritual experience. And I believe that can be found on Roman numeral page. Well, forward to the second edition. Forward to the second edition. Notice something. Last paragraph on Roman numeral page 15, XV. The spark that was the flare to the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker, Bill W., and an Akron physician, Dr. Bob. Notice this. 6 months earlier, the broker, Bill, had been recovered of his drink obsession, the mental obsession, by a sudden spiritual experience. Following a meeting with an alcoholic friend, which was Ebby Thatcher, December 1934, who had been in contact with the Oxford group of that day. You remember, Ebby went to the Oxford group and got step 2 in the plan of action, right? Bill knew the problem from Silkworth, but he didn't know the solution. Ebby gave him the solution and the plan. Look at the bottom of that page. The physician had repeatedly tried means to resolve his alcoholic problem, but had failed. In other words, Dr. Bob was a member of the Oxford group, but he didn't know the problem. But when the broker Bill gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and his hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. He sobered never to drink again up to the moment of his death. He recovered immediately. Now watch this. Notice AA number 3. Talking about spiritual experiences. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the experience and the awakening. Next page. Hence, the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of the Akron City Hospital where Dr. Bob worked. Their very first case, notice the adjective, a desperate one, recovered immediately, meaning he had a spiritual experience, and became AA number 3. He had another drink, had another drink. We know that was Bill Dobson, the lawyer, that was tied down tightly. If you read your big book, you'll know that. And you'll know that from the pictures that you see on the wall. Now watch this. This is going to be interesting. The problem, obviously, is self-centeredness. The solution is a spiritual experience. Now watch this. Let's look at something. I'd like to draw your attention because Bill said something on, let me go to his story. Let's go to Bill's story because he said something that was interesting. And what he said is that God comes to page 14, second paragraph. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. Watch this. God comes to most men gradually. That's the awakening. But his impact on me, which was Bill, was sudden and profound. That's the spiritual experience. A spiritual experience is immediately. A spiritual awakening is a process. That's why we tell newcomers, trust the process, because an individual can have either one, the experience or the awakening. I had the awakening. I had to go through the process. But notice something. Bill said God comes to most men gradually, the process. But in Bill's case, God came to him suddenly and profound. Now let's look at something. I want to draw your attention to page, where is it at? This is going to make sense here when I get to it. Give me a second. And there's a solution. Let me get to it. Page 25. Let's look at page 25. Because we know there is one solution, and we've determined that that solution is a spiritual experience, which Bill and Bob in AA number 3 had, or a spiritual awakening, which is what I had and which most people I know have had. They went through the process. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening and experience. Watch this. Page 25. There is one solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the level of pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process, remember the awakening, the process requires for its successful consummation or completion. Notice, that's going through all 12 steps, the process. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, what was the problem? Self-centeredness. There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple, program is simple but not easy, kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. You got to pick them up. We're going to lay them there for you. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence on which we have not even dreamed. I'm going to have to do a video on this, but not now. Let's keep going. Listen to this. The great fact is just this and nothing less. That we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Notice the asterisk, right? And the asterisk is going to take us to this page. You look at the bottom of the page, it says fully explained. But if you go to page 27, there's another asterisk for amplification. But watch this. The people in the big book knew we were going to miss it. So on page 47, notice what they tell you on page 47. This is crazy. At the bottom of the page, please be sure to read Appendix 2 on spiritual experience. That's how serious it has to be, because if you don't have a spiritual experience, the doctor said in the doctor's opinion, I believe it was on page Roman numeral XXV, he said, this is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic or mind change, there's very little hope of his recovery. In other words, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, either the newcomer or the person that's just clean, once a psychic change has occurred, the same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire. The only requirement for members is the desire to stop drinking. For alcohol, the only effort necessary being to require a few simple rules, and we know that's trust God, clean house, and help others. Now let's go back to page 25. I showed you that because they're telling you unless you have this spiritual experience or this spiritual awakening, you ain't got nothing coming. So you can make all the meetings you want. You can even let the fellowship be your sponsorship, but guess what? That's cool for a little while, but you better not do that for long, because guess what? No human power could relieve your addiction, but God could and would if he was sought. So let's look at this, which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator, because that's what we're trying to get a relationship with, has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Watch this. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could not do by ourselves. I can relate. If you are seriously alcoholic, watch this, as we were, because we used to be, but we've recovered because we've had the experience or the awakening. We believe there's no middle of the road solution. Watch this. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. I was there. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, no human power can restore you, your sponsor, the fellowship, I told you, or nobody else, we had but two alternatives, two choices. One was to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness, not subconscious, of our intolerable situation as best we could. That's step one. And the other was accept spiritual help. That's step two. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Then it goes off into this guy about rolling hazard, but I won't get off into that. But what I'd like to draw your attention to is the page at the back of the big book that it told us to go to, 69, I believe. Let's go to 569 real quick, because I can see it's going to be another part to this. And let's look at what Bill meant when he said a psychic change, a spiritual experience, right? Bill used a lot of words so he wouldn't use the same word over. So you have to understand, I'm a writer, right? I didn't start writing books until I started reading them. Now let's look at spiritual experience. Bill is basically saying no religion but spirituality will transform the person. So you don't have to be a religious person, even though he didn't shun religious people, because he said, be quick to see where they're right. But let's look at spiritual experience. We're going to just analyze this page and then we're going to go. The term spiritual experience, meaning suddenly, and spiritual awakening, which is something that comes through a process, are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that here's the first time he's going to use it to mean change. Personality change sufficient to bringing about recovery. I want you to underline that, because that's basically what he's talking about, a psychic change. Now watch how he's going to repeat itself without repeating itself. From alcoholism, which is an illness, which only a spiritual experience will conquer, has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Look at the second paragraph. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that these, here comes again, personality, psychic, personality changes, or religious experiences must be, underline this, in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. That simply means change. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. In the first chapter, a number of, here it goes again, sudden revolutionary changes. Notice the redundancy of change, psychic change, but he's using different words to illustrate the psychic change that comes through the spiritual experience or the spiritual awakening, which goes back to the message of recovery. We talked about what you recover from. Now we're talking about how you do it. You only do it one way. There is a solution. What is the solution? Spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. Why? There's one problem, self-centeredness. Now watch this. In the first chapter, a number of sudden revolutionary changes, underline that, are described. That's change. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire, here goes another one, an immediate, sudden, and overwhelming God consciousness. You remember we talked about self-consciousness? God consciousness. Followed, watch this, how soon? At once, by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Underline feeling and outlook. Watch the repetitiveness. Among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, watch this, you transform your thinking, you'll transform your life. Though frequent, or by no means the rule, most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James called, this is what a spiritual awakening is. Here's the definition. This is what I got. The educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. You remember Bill said, God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on Bill was sudden and profound. Bill had the experience and recovered. Abraham had the awakening and recovered. Why? What's the result of taking the steps? Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. Get it? So the result of taking the steps is to have a spiritual awakening or experience. Watch this. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realized that he has undergone a, here it is again, underline it, profound alteration in what? His reaction to life. So he looks at life differently now than how he did, because remember, he lived to drink and drank to live. Now he no longer has to do that because he's no longer connected to the created, but the creator. Watch this. That such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. Remember the ABCs of recovery? God could and would if he was sought. Notice what it says next. This is something to underline. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. So the spiritual experience or awakening could rid a person that's been using 40 years and they can recover. You ready for this? Like Bill did in 12 weeks. Who knows? They said, watch this. This is what the literature says. It will always materialize if we work for them. Depending on how much work you put into it is what you get out of it. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner, not outer, inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater themselves. Abby told Bill, what's your conception of God? Not what you were told, because religion is not what it's about, even though you may have one and that's cool. But they're promoting spirituality. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. You remember? Immediately. Our more religious members call it God consciousness, the opposite, like Bill said, of self-consciousness. We wish to say that an alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover. Even though they told you you can't, we can. That's the message. Provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts, remains open-minded. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial, the ability or the inability to accept his reality. What's his reality? He's addicted. He suffers from an illness which only a spiritual solution would provide. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honest, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery. There's the honest, open-minded, and the willingness. But these are indispensable. And then Herbert Spencer goes on to talk about what'll keep you in ignorance is the mere fact that you don't do due diligence on this before you start ruling out that it doesn't work. I have much, much more to say to you, but I'll close with this. All a spiritual experience simply provides is a personality change. And a personality change takes you from what you have become to what God desires for you to be. In other words, your personality isn't you. It's a learned behavior. I hope that you got something out of this message, and I'll build on it later. But I want you to also notice that on page 75, you don't begin to have a spiritual experience until you complete step 5. Notice the second paragraph on step 5. Second paragraph, page 75, it says, we may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. I'm sorry I'm out of time. I got a whole lot more I want to give you, but I know the mind can only hold as much as the rear end can endure. So I want you to continue to tune into our channel. We'll continue to share and give you some more information. But remember, there are only 3 types of people in our world. Those that are depressed, those that are suffering from anxiety, and those of us who are at peace with ourselves. Why? Those that are depressed are worried about the past. Those that are suffering from anxiety are worried about the fear. That's why step 4 deals with the resentment, the past, and it deals with the fears, the future. But those of us who are at peace with ourselves have had a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening, and we know that God is doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. I'm going to leave you with this. Happiness comes to those who are moving towards something that they want very much to happen, and it almost always involves making someone else happy, and that's found on page 77. Our ultimate purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and to help the people within, because when I help others, I help myself. I'm no longer self-centered or self-conscious. I'm God-conscious. I'm not worried about me, but I'm concerned about what God would have me to do and be. Thank you so much. Please go to our site, order the products, the books, keep sending comments, continue to share these videos with your friends, and I look forward to building on what we've already started to discuss. This is your big brother Abraham saying keep coming back.